Yesterday, the Human Rights Commission started a process to investigate the source of the unrest that rocked South Africa in July. In opening the process, the Commission included information gleaned from a book, 8 Days in July, co-written by Kaveel Singh, Jeff Wicks, and Media 24 politics editor Qaanitah Hunter, who joins us now via Zoom. A very good morning to you, Qaanitah, and thank you so much for making the time to speak to us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, amongst other things, your book seeks to highlight the copious amount of information that was at government's disposal and government's failure to avert the events of the unrest. How did you source the information?
Yeah, so when we set out to write the book, we focused on not only telling you what happened, and that was a very big part of the book, to document each day in July of those 8 days and telling you what happened, but also to explore what happened and how it happened and how was it allowed to happen. Now, what we did was we spoke to sources from across the political terrain and focused on the security cluster, and we then took a deep dive to a trove of leaked documentation from the security cluster, including reports from NAC joints and defense intelligence, the state security agency, as well as crime intelligence, to piece together the miniature of how much did people know in the security cluster, were they adequately prepared, and what was the response insofar as, we saw that level of violence, that level of death, 360 people died. So, how prepared was the security cluster? And that was something that we sort of went along to investigate.
You're speaking about the people that died, but there's also the looting that took place. And I just want to read an excerpt from page 105, written by your co-author, Kafir, saying, "In the south of the city, I witnessed what is likely to have occurred in Durban and KwaZulu-Natal all week. Throughout the day, well-placed sources in the police and provincial crime intelligence told me that groups would block strategic key roads, and thereafter sources said they would call on residents from nearby impoverished informal settlements and other areas to loot." Were people used in these events, Qaanitah?
Absolutely, and it was instigated in many ways. But the argument that we make in the book is that the looting was the symptom. The problem itself was the complete undermining of the state, the undermining of the criminal justice system and law enforcement for a myriad of reasons. And the approach that we take is very nuanced in saying that it was multi-tiered. There were many reasons as to why this happened. So the looting, yes, it was instigated, but it was the symptom of a bigger problem at hand. And the bigger problem was the attempt to undermine the state, the attempt to weaponize the failures in society to almost ignite an organic unrest. And the third thing is obviously to undermine President Cyril Ramaphosa in many ways. And so what you saw in terms of the looting, again, as many people pointed out in terms of the people we chatted to and the anecdotes that we got, a lot of it was sparked, a lot of it was organized. But the argument that we make in the book, based on evidence and based on our own investigation, is that this unrest was the culmination of ANC factionalism spilling over in the streets, but a collusion with organized crime in different sectors. So whether it would be organized crime in relation to ATMs, for example, and you saw how ATMs were so purposely, cut out and cash stolen. You saw it in relation to the trucks, and we go into the genesis of the burning of the trucks on the N3 highway and who was that organization that was at the center of it. And then obviously what you see on the screen now, just the complete pillaging of shopping centers in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng.
So what are your thoughts about the Human Rights Commission process? Do you think the ministers due to give evidence there will give their full cooperation?
Yeah, so I have sort of twofold thoughts. The first is that it can't be the only process that's ongoing. The report by the commission by the SAHRC is perhaps something, to help us heal from what happened in July. But you need to have targeted investigations and prosecutions by the National Prosecuting Authority and the Hawks. And you see a lot of tardiness in that regard. You saw the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Shamila Batoyi, going to Parliament on Friday last week and saying, the people at the center of this must be prosecuted, but not saying too much about, what are the plans to let people face the might of justice, so that you set a precedent that it can never happen before. Because the one thing that we point out in the book is that South Africa is very ripe for this to happen again. And I think that the important part about us writing the book, with the quick turnaround that it had, was so that we don't have this amnesia that we constantly have as South Africans, where we sort of sleepwalk from one crisis to the other, to understand the gravity of what happened, how people's lives were completely broken in so many ways. Yes, the South African Human Rights Commission investigation is absolutely critical, but cannot be the only form of sort of inquiry that takes place. There needs to be multiple levels of this. Phoenix itself needs its entire own inquiry. And then obviously we know that the president had set up an investigation or a task team led by Professor Sandy Africa about the failures of the security cluster. That's something I'm keenly looking towards, what the outcome is in that, because we want to know definitively, why was this level of violence not arrested in day 1 or day 2 or day 3, and why was it allowed to continue for as long as it had, and for as many people to have died, and for more than 50 billion rand to be wiped off the economy. And I think that there needs to be a multi-tiered approach to investigations, but I do think there will be a lot of benefit from hearing the evidence just yesterday. The evidence that was presented by the evidence leaders of a woman detailing how they were attacked during this time. It is absolutely a hair-raising, and more importantly, what this commission can do is to sort of map a way, at least, to deal with the real socioeconomic issues that South Africa has: unemployment, poverty, inequality, and how it's so easily used and weaponized by nefarious political ends. Because the point is that, and the one that we make in the book, is that South Africa is very ripe to be ignited for any nefarious political agenda because of this terrible socioeconomic situation. And so what's important for us is to see some sort of measures put in place to ensure that it never happens again, because all indications point that it will happen again.
Qaanitah, just as a final point, do you know how far the process of bringing the perpetrators to book is? And I'm also curious, how did you feel? I mean, it must have been a marathon writing this book, and to have it already being mentioned in such an important process. How did that feel for you and your co-writers?
It's absolutely important. It was, like I said, it was a sort of punishing deadlines. It was a very difficult book to write in the time space. But again, like we said, it was very, very important to get the message across, to get the information out there in a way that's accessible to people. And again, so that there is an importance, so people can understand the gravity of what happened, and then support processes like the South African Human Rights Commission investigation, the NPA investigations, etc. You asked me how far are we in terms of getting holding perpetrators accountable. I think we're very far from that. I think that if we're almost unlikely to see that, given the failures in law enforcement. And I think that the people who are at the center of this knew themselves, because they probably had a hand in the breaking of law enforcement and the criminal justice system, knew that not much would happen. What we see now at best is sort of mid-tier loudmouths, if you like, being arrested, but no real instigators being hauled before justice. And I think also the other thing is that our criminal justice system is completely overwhelmed. And so, what the NDPP is saying is quite indicative that yes, there needs to be prosecutions, but will there be at the level that it would be, set an example and be effective? I think that's probably unlikely. But again, we will look at all of these processes very carefully, and I think that it was definitely an important exercise for myself, my co-authors Kaveel Singh and Wicks to undertake, because of the devastation that it has had on South Africa, and how just how bloody, and I mean, we've not seen an unprecedented this unrest and looting was in July.
Thanks for talking to us this morning. Qaanitah Hunter is a politics editor at Media 24, but of course we'll continue to cover that Human Rights Commission process for you and just what is coming out of there. For now, let's